Walt, we're on the eve of a new year, a new administration, and I'll say we're going to make autonomy great in 2025. Meanwhile, China's moving ahead, removing all the regulatory roadblocks for robotaxis. Now you can go cross city in China. Waymo's getting ready to expand the San Francisco International Airport. But most importantly, you called it. I thank you, thank you, thank you. I got the Christmas gift I wanted, FSD 13, on Christmas Eve. And boy, oh boy, wow, it lives up to the hype. I gotta tell you, it was fantastic.
Well, Merry Christmas to you for getting it again in your stocking, not Cole. But I didn't get it. And, you and I have been doing some research on this. My current Tesla it was leased, I think, in April of 2023. According to Grok, that means that I have hardware 3 and not hardware 4, which I think I would have gotten it if I had that. That's possibly right, or possibly there's no way in the app I can see maybe there's, what the hardware is. Maybe we just haven't looked hard enough to figure this out. But very disappointing to me, and kind of underscores why Apple in part succeeds over Android when they run new operating systems out. It goes across the entire product portfolio all at once versus just a portion. And I also just wonder, are there customers out there that are paying for autonomous driving that have hardware for that aren't getting it at a time when, some of Tesla's consistent supporters are out there touting how great it is that if you buy a Tesla today, it'll come with FSD 13, or that people are getting free trials of FSD 13 when paying FSD subscribers like myself, and maybe those that have hardware 14 aren't getting it. Now, look, this gets back to you have to be at least somewhat objective about your love of a product or a technology. I get that people like that, but when you're out there just, touting one thing and ignoring that maybe it's not the greatest strategy, it kind of, in my view, colors how I receive information from certain people. Just curious on you, because you have been accused in cases of being a Tesla stand. I don't necessarily agree with that in my experience. I think you call it as you see it. But is this the right strategy in terms of the rollout of FSD 13 to give free trials before they've even sent it to people that are paying FSD subscribers?
I think it's the only strategy. There is technical differences between hardware 3 and hardware 4, especially around the cameras. And I believe it is technical. I'm not a technical engineer to give you expertise on that, but I believe it's a technical issue. And this is the only way that they could roll it out. I didn't believe they picked and choose.
So your belief is that there's no one out there that has hardware 4 that is a paying FSD customer that hasn't received FSD 13 because of whatever the rollout strategy. You think my issue is specifically because I likely have a hardware 3 Model Y?
Yes, 100%. In the United States.
Okay. So if that's the case, I'll give them a pass on that. Maybe better communication, with subscribers saying hey, sorry, you have this FSD 13. Would you like to trade in your car and get a new car or whatever it is? I'll give it a pass. And maybe I then overreacted for that. So let's move on to, since you're benefiting from it, how is it? Give us more details about FSD 13, because I trust your opinion more than maybe some of the fanboys that are just saying it's the best thing ever.
It's really, really good, with one caveat. It still has issues on blind corners. Seeing vehicles around blind corners.
What do you mean by a blind corner? Paint me the picture.
You're coming out to the end of my street. Vehicles coming from the left. You cannot see it as a human. Your human eye, so you have to slowly creep out. Sometimes the FSD with 13 will just jerk out in front of it, and you have a car coming to take manual control to stop it. That's an issue that has to be overcome. That is the only major flaw that I've seen so far.
But how are you seeing it as a human?
I'm inching out. I'm going very, very slow. And the vehicle will go out a lot farther than I will.
So the car itself, so you're saying the FSD is not programmed to basically do the inch out?
Correct. Solvable. I hit the feedback button all the time, and who knows where that goes. That's the major flaw that I've seen so far, but I overcome that. But the cool thing was, I get in my car, I hit the start FSD button, tap the brake, garage door opens, vehicle goes out and back out to my driveway, and lo and behold, and away we went. It was amazing.
But let's go back to the blind corner. Are you taking control before it starts to pull out, or have there been situations where you've come up to a what you call a blind corner, and the car starts to move forward and you stop it from moving forward? And why are you stopping it from moving forward? Because you notice the car, and then that gets to the point of like, well, how are you noticing the car first? Or are you just not necessarily trusting it to do that because it hasn't inched out and you're taking over before that blind turn occurs?
It depends on the time of the day. Most likely I'm taking over because it's pulled out in front of a car once on version 12 and it's freaked me out.
So it's possible that it works. It's possible that it works and your trust level hasn't reached that yet, right?
That is true. After the one incident with 12, it spooked me around that corner. So yes, I'm very cautious with that.
Got it. And then, so look, maybe there's a way that they can figure this out. Look, I guess the question is, this gets back to the kind of one of the fundamental questions we get from investors a lot, because they're fed information from Google and Waymo and that complex. If Tesla had a LiDAR in there, would that enable it to see that car coming around the blind corner?
Not necessarily, because if I'm going into town and I'm in an intersection, it sees stuff in the vehicle that I can't see, and it's showing it to me on the display. I don't know why, for whatever reason, this one corner, and if you're a Tesla engineer, I know you test in Palm Beach. I was the guy that put the Luminar ground truth photo up years ago. Come to the house. Let's take a ride together. I'll show you this corner. It's going to be solved.
I mean, here's the rare situation where I may be the Tesla stand here, and just maybe you just have to have a little bit more faith in the fact that it can see what's going on in that blind corner with FSD 13, and it's better than you think. But let's move on from that. How was it overall in terms of like the feel of the drive of 13 versus what you experienced before? Because we were told by the company, right, this was a 5x improvement, 10x, whatever it is. That's what the early fanboys are saying. Tell me about the feel of the drive and other things that have changed that have been beneficial.
It doesn't drive like grandma anymore. It drives like a human.
I don't understand what you mean by that. And I know people have said that online, because on my FSD 12, version 12, you can have it drive 5 miles or 10 miles or whatever it is over the speed limit. So meaning not drive like a grandma. So specify what's different about 13 other than the settings you could have made in FSD 12.
The big difference is it's going more with the flow of traffic. So if you're in a 25 and say the traffic's going 32, 33, 34, the vehicle will go with the flow of traffic. It won't go very slow. Before, you had to put your foot on the accelerator to keep up with the traffic. And then when you put it in hurry mode, it's great. It's more aggressive in lane changing to get around slower moving vehicles. It's driving as a human would, where FSD 12.6, if there's a vehicle in the left lane turning into, say, the breakers, the vehicle would sit there and wait for the turn, where 13 will go in the right-hand lane and go around it as a human would. And so it's a lot more human-like.
So, but let's go back to the highway one. Why would you have to hit the accelerator when you're on the highway? If you had your settings put to 5 miles, differential on whatever the speed limit is, it would have gone faster. Now, look, maybe the traffic on the highways, let's say the speed limit's 60, and you have it set to 5 miles and 65, and let's say for whatever reason everyone's driving 70 or 75. Is that just the issue, that you're not adjusting and saying like, oh, on the highway I want to go 10 miles faster, and on local roads I want to go 5 miles faster? Or is just doing that more naturally?
I don't drive it a lot on the freeway. I hardly ever drive on the freeway. I mostly drive on local roads. The one time I've taken FSD 13 on the freeway was awesome. Just went right with the flow of traffic. The biggest difference for me has been on the local roads and keeping with traffic. And I have to tell you, I took the vehicle out for a test drive the other day. I went somewhere and parallel parked beautifully in between two cars. And then when I got out and hit the FSD, you sit on the screen now, no more tapping on the wheel, and it right out. And there was a gentleman, I barely saw him in the corner of my eye, coming through a stop sign, not stopping on a motorbike. The vehicle just saw it, because you could see on the screen. I couldn't see it. Let the crazy guy run the stop sign, the vehicle went. There's a lot of safety enhancements.
So this big thing, which is, as you talked about, your parallel park somewhere, you hit a button, as opposed to, for those that have used FSD, normally you kind of have to go from a rolling start and you hit basically the turn signal, whatever, lever to get it going. However, if it's not going to your driveway, like, is your driveway unique? Like, so do these people that are doing these tests that are glowing about Tesla, do they all park their cars on the street? Or is it working in their driveway? Or are they just hiding that truth that it still doesn't go into driveways when you're going home?
It pulls out of driveways when you're leaving. I have not been able to get it to go in my driveway. I have a roundabout driveway. It's a simple driveway. It's easy to get into, easy to get out of. When I'm coming home, it just parks right in front of my house, about 4 feet in front of my driveway, fine, but it doesn't pull in my driveway. To me, that's the big unlock. Once this thing can pull in my driveway, that's a big unlock. And the next unlock is when it can pull in my garage. That's a big unlock.
So for a average person, I would say I'm less than average. I'm below average. Just making jokes. When they get into their FSD 13, because again, we're not the super technical fanboys here. Their takeaways clearly are going to be this is much better. But are they going to say like, okay, yeah, this is ready for a cyber taxi, which has been the premise and the risk, I think, to Uber and Lyft public companies is that shit, people are going to get FSD 13 and be like, this is it, and they can do in Palo Alto. It sounds like that is not the case.
It's not ready for Cybercab, point blank, not ready. I do believe they are on the road to autonomy, no pun intended on that they are going to crack FSD, full self-driving. FSD 13 is not the magic bullet that investors think it is. I think there's a big disconnect between...
Well, that's the key question, though, Grayson. Let me interrupt you. Sorry to cut in there, but I don't know what investors definitively do expect, meaning that like as that reality hits, because right now we're getting fed information that this is the best thing since sliced bread. So maybe there's an incremental risk, but I think there is, believe it or not, investors do have nuance. there is a middle ground where it could be good enough to say, well, they are a lot closer to that full autonomy than, brings a near-term risk to Uber and Lyft in terms of the next headline launching in a market, without it being like, yeah, the FSD 13 is definitively the one. It doesn't necessarily have to prove that out, but I mean, that's probably a little good news for our Uber and Lyft investors that, there will be some disappointments relative to the hype that you're hearing, which is always the risk of, these people coming out and just hyping this up as the best thing ever. When you hype things up, there's always kind of this ebb and flow in terms of expectations. So thank you for a more real assessment. That's the first more constructive assessment that I would say. So any of you that are hitting me saying my partner here is a Tesla stan, I just present to you these past comments, which were realistic. You can say something's great and also a realistic assessment of kind of where it is to full autonomy, because obviously safety is of the paramount importance. You don't want people dying out there because that's going to A, be bad. Human life is precious, but also B, just not be good for the industry if you have, any type of bad situations occur.
Think about if there was a situation, what the impact on Tesla stock would be. It'd be a bloodbath. There's no way around it to describe that. But I want to highlight this fact. It is a major technical leap forward. It's not ready for prime time. It's not ready for Cybercab, but it's a major technical leap forward.
I also got to say, so I just got back from a lovely vacation on the beach. Maybe some of you noticed I have a little bit more color in my face. I spent that time reading 3 or 4 books about SpaceX and Tesla. Again, these are just books. Who knows what the real truths are? But I think I try and read it from different perspectives, negative, positive. I didn't read the one super negative Tesla book out there. I don't think I intend to either, because that seems too emotional. Won't name names. But I think there's a more focus on safety at these companies than I think people give them credit for. And even from Elon's standpoint, whether it's SpaceX caring about, basically the environment. And yes, there's certainly other examples and people can talk about some of the flooding stuff or whatever else that occurred. But I think there is a maniacal focus on safety, but approaching it with science and physics as opposed to how regulators, come up with regulations. There was this passage, and we're going to get to this, I think, next in the podcast, but there was this passage in SpaceX talking about all these different requirements that they needed to launch these rockets. And he's like, well, who from DOD, not what department, who specifically from DOD wrote that regulation, and then looked at those things more as recommendations as opposed to requirements, because they were just kind of foolish things that were holding back development and actually getting to the true safety and the true efficiency that they were trying to get to at SpaceX. And I think the same may be the case at Tesla as well.
And the same thing goes for a lot of analysts out there. They write these, I'll call them wackadoodle reports, and I get chastised all the time. If you're going to cover a company or you're going to cover a product, live with the product, use the product. If you're going to cover autonomy, ride in a Waymo every day. If you can ever get access to the Zooxmobile, go in that. If you're going to cover Tesla, own a Tesla, use the product, really understand it. I speak to a lot of analysts and investors, and they just look at spreadsheets, but that's not the whole story. You have to live and play with the product. Look at the Magellan Fund. Look, that's what all the success that they had. Peter Lynch had all those years from understanding and using the product. If you're going to cover this industry, you have to use the product, not just look at a balance sheet or a spreadsheet.
So let's get back to predictions. It's end of the year. Now you've lived and breathed 13. I have not because of my deficient hardware. When do you believe there's going to be any type? Well, you could have a Cybercab. Well, I guess you can't have with the Cybercab. You can't have like a safety driver, right? Because there's nothing to grab in terms of a steering wheel. Let's go with phase one. It would have to be an existing hardware, not the Cybercab. When do you have like a safety driver, robo-taxi situation for Tesla? And if you want to say a market, great. And then B, when do you go driver out for Tesla in any market, even if it's very limited geofence, whatever, however you want to call it?
Limited geofence, Q4 2025, in and around Austin, mostly by the Austin Bergam Airport towards Giga. Q4 2025. Very small.
Driver out, Q4 in 2025.
Very small. I would say probably 4 to 5 vehicles and employees only, perhaps shuttling employees to and from the airport. That I think I could see happening because if you look at the location of where Giga is as it relates to the airport, if they can figure out the airport, that's a very good testing area. I do not see it going into downtown Austin. I want to be very clear on that. In 25, I could see that as a middle, late 26 or early 27. Again, all depending on the technical breakthroughs. If they keep the trajectory of where they're going with FSD 13 as we get to 14 or 15, yes, then I could see that happening.
I think those are very measured predictions. I agree. And by the way, the headline of even if it is very limited and protected, almost like a set route type thing, it's still going to be negative for the stocks of Uber and Lyft. And you could argue fundamentally, why should it be? I'm like, but it will be. I'm just telling you, I've been doing this a long time. It will be. And in terms of the 26, 27, I just want to point out one thing. You're talking about steady evolution. I just fundamentally think that evolutions are happening faster now, right? I mean, what AI is providing for us is quicker development. Elon runs this, he's maybe a little distracted at the moment with the DOGE. Elon puts very hard deadlines on his people to push them to the next level. People embrace that. They want that challenge. It's not something that they can necessarily do for a long time, but our universities are churning out, obviously very smart people every day from this country, hopefully, and as well as others to feed into that development cycle. So I hope your predictions, which I think are probably the right ones. I'm not going to say over or under on either of them, even though I love doing that to you. Hopefully they're gonna come under, and I actually can see a scenario where that is the case.
We know from history and we know from markets, you don't bet against Elon because when you do, you lose.
We're going to rehash something that I've said before. Yeah, I mean I've lived this during the SpaceX came before Tesla, during all the naysayers of SpaceX, and then also with Starlink, which is the internet service on it. And then again, with Tesla. So it's it doesn't mean it's the case for everything. But this one, it's funny, when we were kids, it was like, oh, it's, what are you, a rocket scientist? And it became some, AI is obviously tough, but you've got the best and the brightest people now gravitating. And, especially as some of these startups kind of fade, and hopefully now an administration that I think gets behind it, which is, I think, a good pivot to our next, which is on December 26th, Boxing Day, Liverpool came out victorious. The Biden administration put a lump of coal in specifically the autonomous trucking industries, which is what we've also followed fairly closely. Have got a lot of great relationships there. When they denied Waymo and Aurora's warning triangle exemption. And they sat on this thing for 2 years. Now, the warning triangle exemption, for those that don't know, I was one of them. Grayson educated me, is when that truck, kind of pulls over on the side of the road and you see those little triangles and the flares that are required to be put up. Obviously, if there's no driver in there, there's no one to put the triangles up. So in these situations, potentially probably more rare than most. They're like, oh, you have to put it up within 10 minutes. Like, first of all, if a truck driver pulls over, are they really putting up the triangle in 10 minutes? But I digress on that. What do you think about this specific one? And then we'll get on to some other things, other very late movements by the administration that impact this industry. Let's talk about the triangle one.
It was political. The decision was made by the White House. It was all political. It was a give me to special interest to try and stop.
Well, you say made by the White House. Who was the arm of the administration that implemented this?
We do not have exact clarity on who made the decision. We know it's a high level ranking White House official that ultimately made this decision. If you read the wording of the way it was worded, there's a lot of clues in there. I'm not going to sit here and publicly accuse anybody, but what I will say, it was wrong. It was wrong. It was wrong. They were sitting on this for over 2 years. They're on the waning days of the administration, and they decided to, let's just go break up autonomous trucking because that's what special interests want us to do. Okay, fine. So you want to put a roadblock here. You're out of office in just over 20 days now. You won't accept this. New administration is coming in, and hopefully they will overturn this horrendous ruling and put some common sense back.
But where's the ruling? This is a federal mandated by what agency?
This is a federal motor carrier, FMCSA. So to get around this now, which is going to get expensive, when Aurora goes driver out by the end of April, which they publicly said to the market, from Dallas to Houston, they're going to have a chase vehicle with an individual with warning triangles. That's right, warning triangles. That if the truck has to pull over, that individual can get out within 10 minutes and properly place the warning triangles to meet the requirement.
Well, hold on. Go ahead. Sorry. Continue.
If the exemption was there would have been a blinking light to notify the motoring public that this vehicle was pulled aside the road. The public understands more likely a blinking light than they do the triangles. Have you ever been by a truck and never seen the triangles out? Yes. Has my wife been by a truck and seen triangles? Yes. Is it commonplace in your house? Yes. A blinking light gets your attention. And then the other factor is with a blinking light, there's no human to come out of the truck, so you have less incidents. It's actually safer to have the blinking light than it is to risk a human life to put out the triangles. But no, this administration decides to say, let's give in to special interest. And it's wrong.
I love when you get emotional about these things. Here's the thing. The chase car doesn't make sense to me because for the moment, if my recommendation to you, Aurora, who I'm sure is listening, and our other trucking companies out there that are getting to that point of driver out, just put someone in the passenger seat. Why have another car? You can still at least say your driver out to your investors and to your clients, and then if the thing breaks down, then that dude can hop out or woman can hop out and put the triangles out there. There's no reason to have a chase car.
Technically, if we want to get into technical, then you were not driver out because there's still a human in the vehicle.
I mean,
so it's a technicality.
Okay, what if they're in the cab? They're laying down in the bed in the cab. So if they're in the cab, you're not technically driver out because someone's going to assume that you're in there by the driver wheel. So in order to prove the point, you're going to have some chase car. I mean, this seems obviously silly.
It's silly because it's an outdated regulation that needs to go the way of the dodo bird. That's where it needs to go. Bye. Warning triangle needs to go the way of the dodo bird.
I'm going to jump forward here and read something that we had planned for later in the podcast because we're going to say why this is silly. Not in trucking, but Swiss Re, who, as many of you know, is a leading reinsurer, recently conducted a survey analyzing the safety performance of Waymo's AVs, autonomous vehicles. The research looked at 25 million miles driven by Waymo's self-driving cars in Phoenix, San Fran, and LA, and Austin, I guess. And here were the results. There was an 88% reduction in property damage claims and a 92% reduction in bodily injury claims compared to human drivers. Even when compared to the newer cars, you know, for those of us that have bought cars recently and you have all these great ADAS systems, Waymo's vehicle showed an 86% reduction in property damages and a 90% reduction in body injury claims. So, I mean, autonomy is good, right? So you're putting up these kind of barriers to, you know, prevent it for I'm not sure what reason. Obviously, there's other companies that benefited that we know how politics work and, you know, why these things kind of pop up. In your discussion, Grayson, with some of these trucking companies, are they looking at this as a requirement? Like, what's the penalty if they don't put the triangles up? Like, is it a fine that you just basically kind of do it and say you're sorry? Or are these companies literally planning on all of them as they go drive around to put a chase car in there, if it holds up?
You have to follow the rules. I could see the industry suing the government to override.
Who's going to sue? Because the interesting thing here is the companies with the money, Google, cars, right? Zoox, cars, Waymo or Tesla, cars. Like, do they give a shit about this is a trucking thing? This is not triangles for cars. You're putting pressure on smaller companies that are not well financed. It's weaponizing, right, against companies that should be spending those dollars on developing even safer and safer cars. So who's doing the lawsuit in this case?
We don't know yet. There are various organizations that represent the interests of the trucking industry
Sure.
and the autonomous trucking industry, and I could see them taking the lead on it. Let's not forget, Tesla's working on FSD for semi, so this will affect Tesla.
Right, and Elon is notorious at suing, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. I mean, again, after having read some of the more detailed history of SpaceX, some of the crazy shit that they had to deal with from the Air Force and others in terms of where they were launching rockets, and how contracts were awarded, they had to sue in order for there to be. We are a nation of laws, right? In order for some clarity, but again, maybe the new administration cleans some of this stuff. Let me read another one for you, Grayson, that you can tell me about. Now, this comes from the NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which is part of DOT. They have a program called AV Step, which is a voluntary review and reporting framework for participating ADS, autonomous vehicles. The program would be open to all companies that operate or plan to operate compliant, equipped vehicles on roads. So first of all, this strikes me as like a political thing. Like, oh, we had the national framework before the real national framework occurred. In this case, their national framework, and this is actually the quote from the chief counsel, Adam Raviv, who I guess will be displaced under the new administration. AV Step would provide a valuable national framework at a pivotal time in the development of ADS technology. I mean, you're doing this a couple of weeks before your job's about to end because you want national framework probably attached to your name. That's my read. He goes on, safe, transparent, and responsible development is critical for this technology to be trusted by the public and reach its full potential, blah, blah, yada, yada, yada. Can you walk us through what this is, and is it really a national framework? Oh, wait a minute, Buttigieg is in here. I'm outlining some of this stuff as well, so I think he's part of this press release and this last minute kind of, I would call it voluntary regulation or maybe required. Thoughts?
Bureaucratic government overreach. I'll summarize it that way. AV Step is a disaster in the making. If you look at some of the data that they require, this is detailed data. The number of vehicles operated, vehicle identification numbers, vehicle miles traveled, segmented by zip code and time of day. You know what that last one screams? DEI. You know what all this data is going to happen to this data? It's going to be weaponized. Budget shortfall in Congress happens all the time. Let's go tax the vehicle miles traveled. Oh, you have carbons? Let's go tax that. This data that they're asking for is going to be weaponized and used against the autonomous vehicle industry. It is not to create transparency. It is not to build public trust. It is to use data to weaponize, to slow down the development and commercialization of autonomous vehicles when China goes full speed ahead under President Xi guiding their country. And if we continue this nonsense of this bureaucratic overreach, America is going to be kissing the ring of China for autonomy because they are going to dominate the world on this. That's point blank.
Kissing the ring of China. I love it. But Grayson, what specifically are they? So all they're saying is give us the VIN numbers of all your cars and give us their miles driven. Is that the heart of the quote unquote national? Like, how do you say this promotes the industry? Like, what is their argument on how this promotes the industry as a national framework?
It promotes government overreach. Doesn't promote the industry, it promotes government overreach. And when the government fails to realize, and this is NHTSA data, 37 people die per day from drinking and driving. 34 people die a day from speeding. 9 people die a day from texting and driving. What is that? What the common denominator there is? Autonomous vehicles don't drink and drive. Autonomous vehicles don't speed. Autonomous vehicles don't text and drive. Autonomous vehicles are going to save lives. And then you're going to put all this undue regulation to satisfy a special interest. So this data could be weaponized. We saw what happened when LA tried to get all this data. All the scooter companies had to pull out because they had to go to the mobility data standard. They wanted to become a national framework of overreach. And written into the MDS in LA, this is a little known fact, and I was the co-chair of the Autonomous Vehicle Task Force City of Beverly Hills this time. LA, the city of LA, this is on the public record and archived on the government website. They wanted the ability to take over an autonomous vehicle and reroute it to a neighborhood of their choosing for equality reasons. They want the ability to take over the vehicle. And you don't think that the same people that worked under Mayor Garcetti, who's now ambassador to India, want to do that same thing? You don't think that they're in DOT? You don't think that they're in NHTSA? Oh, believe me. This is all started with the MDS in LA. It is government overreach. It is bad for the industry. And most importantly, it is bad for the U.S. economy.
I don't necessarily see it that aggressively. I mean, like anything, things like this, you can lay the groundwork, and you've lived this world intimately where I have not. So to kind of a passerby, this doesn't seem as dramatic as you've kind of laid out. But I can see how when the government always asks for more information, most of the time that's going to come back as incremental taxation or regulation that's occurring. And that's when I look at this press release and I read this paragraph, the enhanced transparency would promote the responsible development of ADS technology. They're inviting the information that they then use to regulate. And I've seen that certainly from time to time again. So, but again, these are administrations. This is, I think, voluntary. And I think, I'm not sure when the industry is talked about or investors think about a national framework, we're looking for things that are kind of level the playing field across the country so you don't have individual states that restrict the development of the technology. They're using the same word in the exact opposite meaning of it in terms of implementing incremental regulations that would seem to stunt the development. So maybe the Elon approach on this is like, okay, these are great suggestions and we'll move forward. And again, all this is could theoretically change, as the administration changed and we get a more thoughtful actual framework that promotes getting to the development of this technology. Why do we want to get to the development of this technology? Let's just review this really quickly. I just reviewed the Swiss Re things. It's going to save people's lives. It's going to reduce property damage, and most importantly, it's going to be an economy changer in terms of people, being able to take these autonomous vehicles and how deliveries work in the trucking industry and whatever it is. So I don't know, Grayson. It's there's a lot of things that are happening these last couple of weeks. A lot of things that even go beyond autonomy. Haven't really seen that before, other than presidents dropping shit tons of pardons late in the game. But this seems, a little odd. It's curious that the Trump administration is not highlighting this type of stuff more. Everyone they all get accused of not doing that. But how come there hasn't been more kind of vocal opposition? Or they just like, who cares? We're taking over in a couple of weeks, so just let them have their press release fun, and then we'll kind of move on from there.
To me, this is time for DOGE to go into US DOT and clean it up. The big difference from the Trump administration 45 to Trump administration 47, and I'll say this very bluntly, there seems to be a high level of discipline in this incoming Trump administration than previous administrations. I think that's the big difference.
I mean, it's interesting you say that about DOGE because there are a lot of lifetime people within the agencies, right? And a lot of people would say that, well, regardless who changes the top, it's that kind of infrastructure that exists. But if you get people in top that have a different view on how those agencies are going to work, then with the recommendations of DOGE and the bully pulpit of whether it's Elon and Vivek, pointing out like these are the 20 people specifically that created this kind of craziness. And Trump also using the bully pulpit to do it, there could be effective change. So people that were involved in this, obviously the press releases are people that are going to leave, within a couple of weeks. But those that have put together these quote unquote national frameworks or whatever it is for the triangle thing with trucking, there could be some targets on them in terms of their future employment with the government. But I guess we'll find that out as time progresses.
Because if they keep this nonsense up, America once led on the production of textiles, the production of steel, led on manufacturing. all went overseas. Now we're playing catch up. And let's not forget all the stuff with electric vehicles. We have to go basically kiss the ring of China to get the electric vehicle minerals. And then we outsourced all the manufacturing of semiconductors to Taiwan. We're at a strategic disadvantage, which I believe raises national security issues. And the way that these regulations are coming out in the last waning days of the Biden administration, they're setting it up for history to repeat itself again.
Look, no one's kissing the ring of China. Stop with the kissing the ring of China. No one is doing that. They might be stunting our development relative, to what's going on in China. And just this week, there were 4 districts in southern China which mutually agreed to allow cross-city robotaxis. So, as you're familiar with in San Francisco, it doesn't even go to the airport, let alone, to some of the neighboring cities. It's part of the greater Bay Area development. I guess there's a Bay Area in southern China, not like our Bay Area. A big step towards a framework, yet the U.S. just sits back, is what Grayson thinks. I mean, I get it. Like, there are things happening in China, but I also, we've kind of looked at some of these Chinese autonomous companies that have gone public, and as I scratch the surface, there are significant limitations there. I think there is some level of overstatement about what's going on in China. I mean, we've had some Twitter back and forth with people suggesting there's 1,600 autonomous cars companies in Hong Kong alone. But I don't know about that. Like, if someone makes one component within that's 20% of their revenue, is that an autonomous car company? Maybe, depending on how you define words. But look, I've seen this with 5G. The race to 5G and who won and who didn't win. And it's funny when all this H1VB stuff has shown up, like, oh, this guy that moved over to China and gave them all the best 5G. Like, okay, if China won 5G, what the fuck did they actually win? Because 5G hasn't done shit for any country anywhere. So, like, I've seen this kind of race before. I think it's good, because it gets government focused on how you help companies develop. It's fine, and I think it's accurate that we should, try and promote our own companies to the benefit of the citizens in the countries and employment in this country. But I stopped short of some of the more dramatic views of kissing the ring of China, as you said, or otherwise.
What we can verify from China is their President Xi's desire to build an autonomous vehicle and truck industry on the mainland. There's public statements that we can verify. How far along the Chinese companies are on the mainland and developing the autonomous tech, what the ridership numbers are, that we cannot verify. Certain companies that are publicly traded here in the U.S. through ADRs, we can get validated data, but there's a lot of discrepancies around how far advanced. The one thing, as I said it earlier, we can validate the regulatory environment, and then China's now legalized in the Hong Kong airport, you can now operate autonomous vehicles. So they're putting all the regulatory places in place, and it's something that we're going to have to do because China's giving regulatory certainty to the companies that are building autonomy in China while we sit here and have overreach and we try and stun the growth of an emerging industry that is going to change the U.S. economy.
Grayson, it's the end of the year. You keep looking backwards, look forwards. And if you want to continue to blame the government, you're going to be blaming a different government within 3 weeks. So let's look forward into 2025. And specifically, let's look at a great American company and Google, owner of Waymo. And there's some evidence that maybe they're getting closer to operate all the way out to the San Francisco airport, which we thought was a huge unlock and obviously a potential incremental negative headline for our friends over at Uber and Lyft.
It's coming. There was a report in the Mission local San Francisco online outlet that the city and county of San Francisco, through the San Francisco Airport Commission, proposed a process to approve a permit allowing autonomous vehicles at SFO. The permit is for 2 vehicles for mapping, but that is a huge plus step in the right direction. You and I both know once mapping is approved, it's only a matter of time, perhaps months, until they start operating service at FSO. Once that happens, the big question is, do you have to go to that merry-go-round of a parking lot at SFO where the Ubers and Lyfts are, or will they allow curbside pickup? That's going to be the big question that I have when this finally gets operating.
That stuff, first of all, I think it's crazy that you had to read something about the city and county of San Fran in order to do this. Like, come on. This is the stuff we need a national framework for. And let's look at the existing. I'm going to give you perhaps an exaggerated case. Landed at JFK last night, Terminal 5. Had to go from Terminal 5 walking, God knows how long, to go to the I couldn't go to, like, the TWA hotel's right there. Apparently you can't get an Uber pickup at the TWA hotel. How can you stay at the hotel? You're hurting that business. Whatever. Had to go to the AirTran, go to Terminal 7 to get to a parking lot, which then puts me on the Van Wyck, worst road in America. It was funneled down to one lane. There's so many bad things about that. So I think, look, at San Fran, you guys have it easy in general. Like, if you just have a parking lot, like, even if I have to take a little bit of a ride to a parking lot where I can get into an autonomous car, I'm more than willing to do that. It doesn't necessarily have to be curbside. There are greater infrastructure things in our country in terms of how roads are not getting fixed, how the Van Wyck is a disaster, or getting to JFK is a disaster. These are things that autonomy in and of itself can't solve. And so I'm less concerned about that curbside pickup. What it really implies is Waymo getting to the highways, because in order to get that approval in the airport, that means you're ready to drive on that highway to get to the airport. And that is the bigger unlock that I think we've talked about here on Autonomy Markets. And that's what I think we should focus on. The rest of the stuff will figure itself out, or hopefully it will.
There's been a lot of photos and videos popping up on Reddit the last 4 days of Waymo vehicles testing on the highway in San Francisco down towards the airport with humans. But there's been lots of photos and videos, so they're ramping up testing. So that's another sign that they're getting ready to unlock highway and they're getting ready to unlock airport.
So the question then, Grayson, is this, how does the algo work? Meaning, if I unlock the highways in the San Fran airport, is the process to get that to happen in LA immediately thereafter, or is there still a lengthy timeline to unlock the same thing in San Fran and some of the other markets that they plan to launch?
You're going to have to go through LAWA, that's Los Angeles World Airports Authority, to unlock that approval. In LA, if you're staying in Beverly Hills, Brentwood, or Bel Air, you do not need to go on the highway, or actually wouldn't recommend you go on the highway, going on surface streets. If you're going down to the South Bay, which Waymo doesn't operate there yet, the F 4 or 5, you do need highways. But to truly unlock for a majority of LA, you really do not need highway for LAX going to their main ridership areas. Unless you're going to downtown, then you need to unlock the 10.
I mean, I wish I knew more about how airports worked, but there certainly has to be some type of regulation where, I mean, look, San Jose, I know they have that deal with the company Glideways, friends of the podcast, who, are going to have a dedicated road. Every airport should have, now they should be thinking about dedicated paths for autonomous cars to get in and out there. That is the future. It's good for your citizens. It's good for safety. It's good for economic development. Who oversees these fucking airports? And shouldn't there be a national framework for that as a huge unlock? But getting back to my question, and you can comment on them both. Forget about the airports for a second. If San Fran opens effectively the highways, I guess the question is the algo trained on the highways in general? Like, I would assume a Tesla works on highways, or do they have to train highway? Does Waymo have to train their Waymos on the highways of LA separate? Just take the airports out of the mix here.
Well, I got to stay in airports, and then I'll get to your highway thing. So,
okay.
Did a lot of work for one of the big three airlines. So I'll remove their name, but they're one of the big three airlines, one of the largest in the world. And we did a whole data study of optimizing the passenger experience, because that's one of the biggest complaints when you get to the airport, the TSA and all this. And we looked at integrating autonomous vehicles where it would integrate into the airline's app, so that the vehicle would know if your plane landed on time, if it was delayed, what your walk time was from the gate to there. Do you have luggage? And it would optimize the vehicle would be there waiting for you in the spot, so you don't have this long wait. That's a huge unlock that the autonomous vehicle industry partners with the airlines. You combine both your data sets, you get a really, really great passenger experience that the travelers get rid of that friction. Getting back to freeways, yes, they will have to test on Los Angeles freeways. Yes, they will have to modify their data set for each freeways where they run. The exact way of how they're going to have to modify their data set, I am uncertain of, but they will have to modify it. I also want to point out on freeways, Waymo has been, I believe it's for the last 8 months. So you have to, Elias will correct me if I'm wrong, maybe 10 months. Waymo has been testing driver out on freeways in the greater Phoenix area. So that's the one that we can confirm that they've tested driver out. We can confirm that in the San Francisco Bay Area and going in Silicon Valley, they've tested on freeways with driver in. We do not have any reports, any photos or videos of driver out on the San Francisco Peninsula freeways yet.
Again, I want to get back to my fundamental question here. Like, a freeway is a freeway. Like, if I buy my Tesla here and it operates on a freeway, and and I drive it down to Florida, it's not that the Tesla has been trained on a Florida freeway versus a New York freeway. Like, I don't like. Do they have to? Is Waymo different in that they have to train them on the freeways or highways, whatever they're called in their local municipality, in every market? Like, do they have to send 4 cars out training them? Like, oh, this is how this freeway works, or can they just have an algo that says, like, okay, it's an on ramp, it's an off ramp. These things are pretty standard, and the AI or the algo has figured out how to deal with these things.
Waymo uses map-based technology. Tesla doesn't use maps.
Right. So if they're testing this stuff in San Fran and whatever, so there still could be kind of a scaling timeline to do this stuff, to train this stuff. Whereas, maybe if Tesla does ultimately work, 13 goes to 14 goes to 15, it's like a magical unlock everywhere without having to train in individual markets.
That's the Kodiak approach in autonomous trucking. Yes, the question that we have going to the future, and Wave is the same way, do maps become a hindrance to really, truly scaling autonomy? That's the big question to look as we look forward to the future.
And we do know that Waymo has their own research behind a different approach where it's not necessarily mapped and it's more of an end-to-end approach. So exciting times. As you know, I'm very bullish on how AI has changed kind of the development of all of this stuff. And this could be one of the ways we see those changes. Kind of funny because we think of like Uber and Lyft as being disrupted by Waymo, but then Waymo itself could face its own disruption if the whole architecture of how autonomy works and moves forward changes.
It very well could. And that's why they're developing the Emma model inside of DeepMind. And we'll be very curious to see how that rolls out. Or does Waymo keep their model going? Because one, it's been proven highly successful, highly safe, because they have the Alphabet funding to keep it going. So that model does continue.
Yeah, capital is certainly important. We'll see what the financial markets provide for us in 2025.
What do you see coming to 2025? Do you see Waymo continuing to dominate the robo-taxi market?
I think I'm going to keep my kind of 2025 comment more broad. I feel like there's a lot of people almost hoping for the trough of disillusionment. Is that what it's called, Grayson? After the quote unquote hype cycle. And I think those people are going to be disappointed by not having their disappointment. I think the developments of AI and autonomy are going to continue at a strong pace, and look, we were obviously in 2016, we talked about this in the earliest episodes of Autonomy Markets and kind of why I'm back at it and why this thing has been born, Autonomy Markets. I just don't think you're going to have that trough of disillusionment, which is pretty exciting for the next couple of years ahead of us, and specifically even in 25.
You're going to have years of success. Walt, next week, it's New Year's Eve. It's exciting. We're going to break out the champagne. We're going to toast the new year. What do we need to look for in the autonomy markets throughout the next year? Any big catalysts?
Unless you're going to get in an autonomous car, stay off the roads. We want to see everyone in the new year happy and healthy. Take it easy on amateur night, which is what I call New Year's Eve.
He's right. Unless you come to my house where I'm cooking a feast and everybody's sleeping over. And to our listeners and viewers, a huge thank you for supporting Walt and I this year. Your feedback has been tremendous. The growth has been tremendous. And I thoroughly enjoy doing this every week with you, Walt. So thank you as well. And thank you to our listeners. You'll next see us next year. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is making autonomy great. Have a wonderful New Year's.